I now call to order the February 27th, 2023 meeting of the Wallingford-Swarthmore Board of School Directors. As you're willing and able, please join me and rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Ms. Elias, would you please take the roll call this morning or this evening?
Mrs. Dole?
Here.
Dr. Grande?
Here.
Mr. Henry?
Here.
Mrs. Holbert? Here. Mr. Kudis?
Here.
Mrs. Vogt? Here. Ms. Witset?
Here.
Ms. Bukowski Smith?
Here.
And Mrs. Walkman?
Here.
We have 9 voting members here tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Elias. All right, that takes us then to our student representatives report. Mr. Darson.
For the past 4 years, February has always been my favorite month at school. There are just so many fun things at the high school, and it feels like we're constantly doing something. At the start of the month, the Young Activist Coalition put together a phenomenal Black History Month assembly. It was genuinely the best assembly that I have ever been to. They featured 2 spoken word poets, 2 songs, and a student-edited video. Every single performance was so powerful, and I know that it was an event that really resonated with most of my peers as well. Everyone at the high school also participated in the annual Chris King Games. It's definitely one of my favorite fundraisers and traditions at the high school. We all came together to honor Chris and collected money for a scholarship for one of the graduating seniors. Another one of my favorite events, Singing Valentines, also took place this month. The Silvertones came around to our classes and serenaded us with Toxic and Never Gonna Give You Up. Many of the Silvertones are also in the high school's production of Grease. They've been working super hard on learning the dances and building the sets, and I can already tell that it's going to be an amazing show. Their performances are on March 3rd, March 4th, the 10th, and the 11th at 7:30 p.m., and on March 5th and 12th at 2 p.m. Tickets are $10 for adults and $5 for students and seniors and will be sold at the door. Go out to support them. The middle school students also received a lot of support for their production of Shrek the Musical. There was so much talent and it was a hilarious musical. In terms of community events, West hosted a math night on Thursday, which was a really cool way for kids to get excited about math. I remember always whining because I didn't want to see math in my textbooks because I could never see how they applied in the real world. And at math night, kids did fun activities that helped them understand that math is not only useful, but also fun and engaging. A similar event, STEAM Night, is going to be hosted at NPE on March 23rd, so bring your kids out to that one too. SRS is hosting an international night on March 9th at 6 p.m. It'll be a great opportunity to learn more about the rich cultures of many of our peers and neighbors. February was a lot of fun, but I look forward to all that's coming in March.
Thank you so much for your report. I never really enjoyed February all that much myself, but it's good to hear all the wonderful things that are going on in the district. With that, that takes us to our focus topics. And Dr. Marseille, would you like to introduce our superintendent's report?
Yes,
Went
yes,
down
we'll
one
get,
too far. Thank you.
we'll get to that in a little bit. So I thank you, Ms. Walkman. Let me get my clicker ready. So we have 2 focus topics this evening, and Mr. Heinley is going to share with us the wonderful things happening at NPE. And then afterwards, I will briefly discuss administration's recommendation for the conversation around access, right? And the meetings that take place or committee meetings that we spend a significant amount of time unpacking a significant amount of information, and what does that mean for the community. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about some of the items that are on the agenda for board vote. Not going to speak to every single one of them, but I did want to share a couple. I did want to speak to and thank Ms. Martin for her service during her tenure with the district, and she is resigning on the 3rd. Friday will be her last day, so we want to thank her for her time with us, and that as a result of that shift, there is, amongst others, a contract that we're going to ask the board to approve. And we are really happy to have the opportunity to work with the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit and Ms. Sandley Edling, who is the Chief Financial Officer of the IU. And her team has agreed to come on board and help support the district in that transition. As you know, there are a number of shifts in that department as well, and I think they're going to help us with our payroll and our county clerk as a position as well. But more importantly, will or is equally provide us with some neat information about how to better support that department as they do conduct a needs assessment for us. And I've had the opportunity to work with Ms. Edling and her team when I had my little stint over there on the other side in Montgomery County, and she has a wealth of experience and will help us throughout that process. And as such, what you are going to be also asked to approve, and we're recommending that Mr. Ken King will be our interim business manager as we look for a permanent business manager for the upcoming school year, as soon as we can put that and post that position. Mr. King comes to us. We pulled him out of retirement and we called PDE, got emergency certification to have him come in. He originally came to us from the Springfield Township, where he retired as their business manager. Prior to that, he was at Upper Moreland. Well, I should say prior to that, he was at Interboro, right? And then before that, he was at Upper Moreland. So we are very fortunate, as it's a very shallow pool in terms of business managers. They retire and they retire. But we're excited that he's able to come out of retirement and support us during the transition, and the multiple experiences he's had in multiple schools, I think, comes as a bonus. Another individual that we are happy to as well as recommend, bless you, is Ms. Rachel Cotton, who is on the agenda for recommendation as our communications and community liaison. And we are very fortunate to have someone who has played that role in a K-12 setting, as she supported the Delaware County Technical Schools. She's not new to the district, as she has been here providing communication supports when she was on the other side with her other employer. So we're really excited that we can put her on the agenda for recommendation, and that we look to have you approve that in March 6th. We hope, anticipate that will be her first day with us. Then there's a contract with People Bench. And before I share a little bit about People Bench, I want to put some things into context. And I think the board will appreciate more so, bless you, with respects to the background as to why I think this is extremely important, and the work that needs to be done. Rarely do you win from behind. It happens. People come from behind. It makes for good entertainment to some extent. But when we talk about human resources, when we talk about recruitment, retention, and strategies to make sure that your workforce is happy, your workforce is continuing to receive the professional learning experiences that they need. I think we need to be innovators and be ahead of the curve. And I think this People Bench contract, this collaboration, I think helps us with that. So I want to share a couple of things with you. And I think that many of the board members are aware of this. So it's background for you, maybe new for members of the public and some of the publics who are very keenly aware of what is happening. So we have known for quite some time. And we've known this long before COVID. And COVID really has accelerated this significantly. That there have been really two recently in the month of February, pieces of literature that has illuminated the teacher shortage across the state of Pennsylvania. And we have two organizations that put that out. So Teacher Plus and the National Center on Education and Economy spoke to the data that speaks to this crisis, and many have called it a crisis. And PDE put out recently in early February, the Foundations of Our Economy, Pennsylvania's Educator Workforce Strategy. And in that document, they highlighted the significant challenges that Pennsylvania is facing. Is that it's going to take very systemic and deliberate and intentional mechanisms in place in order to address that. And part of that is thinking about how we need to transform the way in which we look at teaching and make it a much more desirable profession that attracts and retains highly qualified staff. And part of what People Bench will do is support our administrative offices more intentionally and more deliberately in terms of we want that, but what does the research say in terms of the best ways to go about that, right? So one of what this graph that you are looking at, and I encourage those to please go to those individual reports and read them yourselves in terms of some of the strategies that they are recommending or some of their commitments. So as you look at the precipitous dip that has occurred from 2015 to 16 to 17, kind of somewhat flat line in 18, 19, it perked a little bit 19, 20, and then dropped again in 2020, 21. So the data, to some extent, speaks for itself in terms of the need for us to think about how we are going to stay ahead of the curve with retaining and attracting quality educators in a market that is very, very shallow. Fewer individuals are walking into post-secondary programs interested in education. Fewer are walking out with degrees and certification. And what that creates is a feeding frenzy for 500 plus districts fighting for a very small pot. And our community in our district being prepared to take full advantage of how do we stay ahead of that. And I've said to many of my colleagues and to others, and now with Dr. Cellini, who's on board, in terms of where are we going to fish proverbially? Upstream, or do we wait till individuals come out of these institutions and fight for them? When systems are thinking differently about recruitment, retention, and thinking about the catastrophic challenges social-emotionally educators have had to face over the last couple of years. Our teachers being in the front line of that process, right? Because we ask our teachers every single day. And we started this year with a Maasai proverb, and how are the children, right? A teacher's fundamental core objective is to ensure all the children are well. But in order for the children to be well, our staff needs to be well, right? And we understand that we have a long way to go with this administrative team, but what we're not shying away from is being intentional and deliberate of our commitment to make it a healthy and vibrant and welcoming place to be that will then continue to attract some of the best. There are school systems out there that are extremely competitive, and they compete with a very, very, very deep pocketbook. Can't compete in terms of that. And that's what happens when you have a shallow pool. What we can do is think about, yes, we want to be competitive within our structures of our budget. But we also want to make sure that we're offering a certain level of experiences that other educators can't get someplace else. And there's this balance that's happening across this country with all employers in terms of quality of life, in terms of, do I really feel valued? Do I really feel respected? People talk about it, but I don't necessarily see it in action. And we've heard about workforce morale, burnout. And I think it's important that to be competitive, and everyone here knows I'm extremely competitive. For those who sat in the interview panel, interviewed me for this position, I said I unfortunately have an insatiable appetite that oftentimes may not be healthy about winning. And winning means ensuring that our staff and our students are provided with phenomenal experiences that allow them to excel. Where this place becomes the destination of choice and continues to be. With our current elementary enrollment numbers, it seems like that message continues to ring with where we are with some of our elementary numbers in our 4th and 5th grade classrooms. Well, that's another conversation. We're going to talk about that at another time. A good problem to have, but it shows you the need for us to be a lot more strategic about the way in which we think about our staff, what we do with our staff, how we recruit individuals, how we keep them here, and how we acknowledge the way in which they are processing their experience while they are here. So PDE and PA needs teachers and Teachers Plus and NCE really articulated 5 fundamental core areas in which they want to either PDs calling it guiding principles. The 5 policy strategies are listed on the right as well from PA needs teachers and Teacher Plus NCE. And you can see that they're similar to some extent in the way in which our commitment to incentivize high quality teacher preparation, right? That's extremely important because I think one of the dangers, it's my opinion, is we want excellent educators in front of our children. We have to be really mindful the message we're sending that may lead people to believe we're lowering the bar in order to bring people in, right? And I think sometimes that some of these strategies, if we're not careful, may give the wrong message in terms of individuals' readiness to be in front of children. And the idea about how are we going to invest in teacher retention, and how do we build capacity within our staff? How do we expand pathways for the youth to think differently about education? So we're very fortunate, and with the DCIU and through the leadership of Dr. Masakowski, that the DCIU has a feeder program and a teacher academy program for aspiring high school students who want to be educators. We're very fortunate that we have 5 students every month who go and meet with other students from across Delaware County who come together to learn about and be a support mechanism for them, for each other as they think about moving in this path. And I think this is the conversation I said earlier about where are we going to spend our time? And I think you have to spend your time at both ends of the stream. Cultivating experiences that are so powerful that students want to, right? And I think this is the challenge when you look at the underrepresentation of particular subgroups in teaching. That starts with, if I didn't have a great experience there, I'm not interested in coming back. So that's a double-edged area in which we need to focus as well. And I think that the work that we need to do and why we have asked the board to approve this collaboration with People Bench is the idea to be ahead of this process. It is an opportunity to say, which is what People Bench said, what if we made schools amazing places to work, but also at the same time made them amazing places to learn? And that's the way in which they go into this work, helping us think about 2 fundamental ways. We spoke about, obviously, the high turnover, the level of frustration, anxiety teachers are facing, a tremendous amount of pressure that is coming to them at every single angle that they see that. And we want to make sure that we are ahead of the curve as we think about the way in which People Bench will help us think about 2 fundamental systems, which is the resilience tracker, which allows us to survey teachers to the extent in which we do social emotional check-ins with our students and provide principals and provide central office administrators with strategies and how to address those and how to support that. And the workforce strategy builder is the way in which, how are we thinking about recruitment, retention, and systemically putting that into really meaningful and significant organizational design. So I'm really happy that we had the opportunity early in the year through University of Pennsylvania's Innovation Hub to have an opportunity to sit down with People Bench and think about our workforce in a very different way. I know that it's a level of commitment that we've talked about, but we haven't really talked about the strategy, right? We all want to do it, right? But this gives us a research-based framework on what that looks like from a resiliency tracker and checking in. And then from there, creating a dashboard for each school that administrators have access to, and then thinking about ways in which to create those wonderful working experiences. So we're really happy that we are able to, we like to partner with People Bench over the next 18 months to implement some of those strategies. I hope it continues, but we wanted to, as early adopters, come in and do this. It's not that we should be applauded for being the first, but we are excited that we are putting our money where our mouth is, and we desire that change, which means we need to bring in individuals to help us with that change. So I'm excited about the opportunity for that to happen, and Dr. Cellini, our HR director, who's going to play a fundamental role in helping to facilitate some of that work. The couple updates I want to share, and I don't know if you have had the opportunity, but I was really excited to see the fact that one of our 9th grade student, Casper Stockman, was awarded the 2022 Congressional App Challenge by Representative Mary Gay Scanlon. And part of that was bringing students across the Commonwealth and encouraging those individuals to think differently about coding and inspiring them to pursue careers in computer science. Casper, who is the founder of Alto Development, created this wonderful gaming app. I put the link in there, which I think you should watch. It's phenomenal. And I think that it's those particular experiences where we are very intentional on the idea that our students and the way in which we are evolving are more than just end users. They are creators, they are designers. And I think that's why when we talk about some of our learning journeys and some of the experiences we're taking is exposing our staff to what is possible and what other institutions are doing. Not to, I don't like copy and pasting because it works very differently in terms of context, but it wakes up the senses in terms of what others are doing. And I'm excited. Obviously his mentor in the project, Mrs. McLeod, who's been helping him, but the idea to go from coding to an app and then starting your own company and then being recognized for that are those type of experiences that we talk about when we talk about curricular practices that connect to the real world. So we're really excited about that. And we're also excited, and I want to congratulate our students who will be recognized at the National Technical Honor Society induction ceremony in March 22nd. I see Ms. Cotton in the audience smiling. Right, she should be. So when we talk about experiences, we talk about differentiated experiences, right? And I think that this district will travel farther and faster when we open the opportunity and provide differentiated experiences for our students. So it's really great to see 4 of our students who are in the medical career program at Delaware County Technical School who have met this rigorous criteria and who will be recognized and forwarded their induction on March 22nd. So congratulations to those 4 students. And there's lots of reasons to celebrate February, right? But I did want to recognize, since we're talking about CTE, that February is CTE month. We don't talk about that as much as we should, but I want to recognize the educators and the students who are doing a phenomenal job, really connected to their passion. And during this month, Barlett took first place in the welding fabrication competition with Skills USA. So we want to recognize that effort as well. Saprasia made a mention of this in her report. The district is really excited to really ride the coattail of 2 fundamental experiences, 2 different dates, which is International Night. And one that is being hosted on March 9th through the leadership of SRAs, PTO, and HSA. We want to celebrate and acknowledge that and have asked anything the district office can do to support that. We're willing to do that. I think it's a great opportunity for the entire community to come out and experience the diversity that lives and thrives in our community. And we couched it in terms of a night of customs, culture, and cuisine. So yes, there will be food. At the end of the day, we'd love you to come for the customs and culture, but we know that food brings people together much faster, and we're okay with that. And then on March 23rd, we are excited because the high school students last year did International Assembly. And we've been collaborating with the high school. Dr. Masikowski and I have met several times, and we've asked the students, what ways can we help you in support and promoting this event? So they're going to have a afternoon assembly, and then later on in the evening, they're going to have one for the whole entire community. So we're excited to participate and help in as many ways as we can. And then lastly, I want to share about the February 7th ruling. And this board is well aware of the inequalities that exist, but more specifically, the inequalities in state funding. And at the end of the day, unlike other underserved districts, right? There's not too many individuals who feel sorry for Wallingford-Swarthmore's financial woes and challenges, but all districts face those with rising unfunded mandates, rising costs with regards to students who need individualized instruction that we want to provide at the highest level, but that comes with a cost. And too many times, state legislators some were vigorously fighting for equity and funding. As you were aware in 2014, the case that was presented, William Penn School District versus PDE, saying that the current structure disproportionately discriminates against districts in need. And you're well aware of the funding formula and its inadequacies. We appreciate continued dialogue with our legislators in terms of those who are pushing the envelope. But the reality is that Pennsylvania woefully, unfortunately, has created a system. And when we talk about systems, we're talking about year in and year out and year in and year out, right? Which is institutionalized in a way in which there is significant inequity in funding. I brought that to the board because we're always, and you're always fighting for access. Even though when that comes, and we may not see a significant dollar share in that because of our socioeconomic status. But I think it is important that all of us are significantly impacted by a funding formula that is not equitable. And different communities have different needs. And what we are looking at as a district is that funding is not keeping up with our special education needs. Just absolutely not in terms of that, in terms of our process. So I share this in some level of cautious optimism that there are many steps to go. And I'm hoping that once this moves to the Supreme Court and that there is bold and decisive action taken once and for all around this fair and equitable funding for our public schools. And with continued advocacy, let's see if we can finally get it right. But then obviously the biggest challenge is once that does happen, where's this revenue stream going to come from in terms of to providing that level of access. So the advocacy continues. Here's a couple of dates that I wanted to share with you. This is coming up like tomorrow, right? But on March 2nd, we will have another opportunity. We are having a opportunity for community members to talk to us about their thoughts and recommendations with regards to the replacement of the King Field turf. And we're going to have ELA, Mr. Clancy, Dr. Mansenka, Dr. Hilden, and Mr. Klumbundi out there, sharing what preliminary analysis has been done with King Field. The non-negotiable for this board is that the turf field has seen its useful life and it needs to be replaced. And we intend on replacing that prior to with the schedule that I'll be sharing with the boards at the end of this week. Everything aligned correctly that we'll have that, so it does not have a significant impact on fall sports coming through. And then we also want to give the opportunity for individuals to talk, obviously not just about the turf field, but other related projects that they believe are needed improvements in King Field, which I want to share with this community is a long-term process. I've shared this with the board. This is a long-term commitment. We do not have the dollars to fix everything in 1 calendar year or 2 calendar years or 3 calendar years or 4 calendar years. But we do need to begin prioritizing and begin preparing a budget long-term that will address some of those needs. Some of the additional things with King Field is we have a fence that wraps around King Field that has been here since the beginning of time. That needs to be removed. We have some slight modifications that we need to make on the visitor side for ADA compliance. We do know we have some work to be done to making the whole entire facility much more ADA accessible. That is a long-term project, but smaller projects we can begin moving the needle with. So we have a scoreboard that's been there, and you've walked the field, you've seen it, you've gone to the competition. If one more light goes out during a game, I'm gonna have a problem, right? And we've had problems with it. So that is included in that process as well, and laying the foundation for work that's going to come over multiple years. So I want to exercise patience. We can't fix everything. It's the individuals who contact me and said, when are you going to eradicate the achievement gap and the opportunity gap? You've been here for 1.5 years. I haven't seen much, right? And I said, I appreciate you. I want your advocacy. Come and share that at these public meetings, right? Remind us of our commitment, but it didn't happen overnight. And we're making steady progress towards those goals. But I really want individuals to come out and have that experience. A number of other events that are taking place that make reference to that as well. So that concludes my report. We have some upcoming meetings that we would like to invite you to, and then hopefully we'll see you at some of those meetings. That's it, Ms. Walkman. I took more than enough time.
Thank you, Dr. Marseille. I think in the interest of time, and we have a student with us this evening for this next presentation, I know that we may have some questions or comments about some of what Dr. Marseille covered in his report. There are also some voting items. I'm going to ask the board members if you wouldn't mind holding questions and comments till that point in the agenda so that we can move forward with our focus topic. And with that, I think we have Mr. Heinley.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm excited to be here on behalf of the MPE community. I also have a young friend, a 5th grader, who is going to help me with my presentation tonight. It seems like just yesterday I was here talking about our homegrown poem, last year. It's been about a year, and I could probably highlight 15 different things that we do at school and within the NPE community. But tonight we're going to focus. I'm going to give an overview of some exciting activities coming up. To Supreja's point, March is a busy month every year, so I'm going to highlight a couple of things that we have going on. Also, just a very quick kind of update on things that you've heard about over time. But the focus for tonight, I hope you come away with a clear understanding of what specific activities and initiatives this year at NPE are we doing to promote inclusion and belonging. And as Dr. Marseille said, sometimes it takes time. We're in the first step. This is the first year we have teacher leaders who are really helping with this work. So I have just kind of a brief overview of some of the monthly activities, some of the larger activities that we've done throughout the year. But before I start, I did want to thank the board on behalf of the staff, the community, for all of your support, for visiting the building, for a couple of you coming out on the turkey trot. Thank you for coming to support our community in the PTO. It was great seeing you and your families back in November. And also those who have come by and visited our school. We really appreciate you taking the time to come see our students and see the experience of NPE, the place to be. And it's the people that make it the place to be. Couldn't be prouder of our community and of our staff and the wonderful things that they do on a daily basis for our kids. So thank you for your ongoing support. Just very briefly, you've heard of PBIS. You've seen a couple presentations. I'm sure one from me a couple of years ago. We continue to implement PBIS Tier 2 in our building. The 3 to be responsible, respectful, and being safe is at the heart of what we do. So we continue our implementation with students, with the building. So that is something that we continue on this year. A curricular update, you may remember from last year from Dr. Mozakowski, we started the science of reading in grades K and 1. We are in the second year of adoption. We're seeing a lot of progress with students in literacy. We're still evaluating our practices and analyzing it to hope to continue to build upon early literacy in K and 1 into grade 2. Grade 2 is in the first year of their implementation. So from a curricular point of view, early literacy, we're really putting a lot of focus on foundations, Tier 1 supports in the regular education classroom. As I said, we continue to analyze and evaluate our practices. Read Across America, day and night, because it's going to be day and night at NPE this upcoming Thursday. During the school day, students will have the opportunity to hear from different people, guest readers in a classroom to promote a love of literacy. I believe hot off the press, we actually have a couple service dogs coming to read with our reading support students, a couple of that, so we're excited about that. And the evening time, and a big shout out to our PTO, who was so supportive. As I said, the Turkey Trot, Read Across America, STEAM Night, really do a wonderful job supporting our programming. But Read Across America Night is one of the most exciting, well-attended events we have at NPE. I believe this is the first time that we've been in person since 2020. So we are really excited about that. Students get to visit classrooms where they can hear 2 different readers, or 2 sessions, I should say. But there's also time to get pictures with characters in the gym and the cafeteria, and also do a book swap. And also walk away with a new book of their own. So just a wonderful event at NPE. That's this upcoming Thursday night. STEAM Night, just like Read Across America, when I go to these events, I couldn't be prouder of our community. STEAM Night, we have staff, we have parents, and we have friends of the community who come out, volunteer, put together stations for students to learn about, experience different careers, right? We have some experiments and they walk away with a deeper understanding of all things STEAM. And it really is volunteer. It's our parents, it's our friends of the community and our staff members. And it's just a wonderful opportunity for our parents to also partner with the school and give back to our students. And as I said, at the end of tonight, I hope you come away with kind of a clear understanding about what we are doing at NPE to promote inclusion and belonging. This right here, and it's not just limited to this group. It's my art teacher, it's the classroom teachers, but this is my cultural equity proficiency teacher leader team. And it's not just equity and diversity. We've kind of married the tenets of the 3 to B. So not all of this is necessarily diversity, but it's putting together activities that promote respecting each other and our diversity. But this is my teacher leadership team: Kate Friel, Katie Gray, Ellen Yates, Erica Fasoli, Megan Doherty, and Elisa Goldman. They meet monthly with the district team, and then we also meet monthly at NPE. But the time, the effort, the dedication that this group has put in to promote positive experiences for our students is to be commended. So this is my leadership team. Certainly the work goes down to the individual teachers and support staff, but this is my teacher leader group, if you will, for everything that I'm about to share with you. So we started in October, and we were looking for ways to incorporate themes. So we could use PBIS, we could use literature, and how can we infuse that with our equity and diversity work? So as you can see, right here on the right is our February flyer. Ellen Yates is our graphic designer. Once a month, every classroom teacher and all staff members receive the flyer for the month. And if you look on the left side, each month there is a different theme. We also provide teachers read alouds from the district diverse book list, which promote these themes. So in our classroom, students may have the opportunities to discuss topics in books, learn from each other, and also talk about how can they grow with self-control and self-esteem. So these are monthly events. Teachers receive a wide list of books that they can do as a read aloud in the classroom. So we're really excited about that. And as I said, we've been doing that since October. The gratitude tree. This is one of my favorite things. And just even the process. Some of the best things, you're not sure where you're going to end up. It's kind of the journey. And the gratitude tree started with the November theme that you saw with the read alouds. This gratitude tree is it's between our first and second grade classrooms. So kind of the old entrance, for those who may know the old NPE, but it's down there on the other side of kind of like the library. But this tree was first up for gratitude, was for leaves. And what are we grateful for? And when you read some of the things that kindergartners, young kids put on a gratitude, what they're really thankful for, it really reminds you of why we're all in this. Some of the messages to our staff were just so sweet, and they were thankful for each other. It was just really great to see. So I'm sorry, the students in art created a leaf and they wrote it on the leaf and we put them all up. So at the end of it, you can see we didn't want to take the tree down. So it kind of transformed, and this is all my team. My team put this together, and you can see snowflakes. Students created snowflakes and designed them. And just like a snowflake, no two snowflakes are identical. So we put all of the popsicle stick snowflakes up on the tree. So it's not so much the gratitude tree now, but each student's represented on that wall, and some are coming down, right? We're moving away from winter, but if you can see on the far right there, you have an owl. And this goes back to the theme, inclusion and belonging. It says all snowflakes belong. So then there's a conversation in a kindergarten classroom about we are all, very different, very unique individuals. So this has kind of become another hub of some of the work that we're doing. Our wheel of diversity. If you come into the front main entrance and look to the right, we have a wheel of diversity. Now, there's a lot of themes on there, not all necessary diverse, but it also ties into themes of the month, cultural observances, for example, and also other themes that tie into our PBIS. For example, last week, and I'll touch upon this later on, we observed the International Stand Up to Bullying Day. So I believe that's one of the spokes over there on the wheel. So the wheel of diversity supplements our PBIS work, and each month my cultural proficiency team asks for student volunteers from different grade levels to research the themes that are the spokes on this wheel. And the students do the research, and then they share their research with the whole entire school during our student announcements. There's also a puzzle, as you can see on the bottom right here. Students, kind of like Wheel of Fortune, can purchase letters with their Dolphin Dollars, PBIS. And if you could hear Miss Ellen Yates on the, actually, and our other staff as well, on the morning announcements, the students are so into trying to solve these puzzles. This particular one was just solved today. I am worthy of love and respect. And the students have just absolutely, they come in, they go right to it. Did someone get another letter? Did someone get another letter? So just absolutely thrilled about that. On the right here, you can see our students doing the daily announcements. Again, researching the different topics for each month and then presenting it to the entire school. A big shout out again to our PTO, not just our school, our staff, but our PTO. Has also been intentionally incorporating activities to help promote inclusion, belonging, and diversity. This one in particular was a really powerful assembly, Traditions of India. And our students gained a deeper understanding of Indian culture and customs. In addition to this, our PTO has been receptive to community feedback about having our PTO meetings offered on Zoom, and also moving the dates to try to get more families involved. So again, inclusion and belonging, not just with our students, but with our larger community. So very appreciative of a supportive PTO. This particular assembly, I heard multiple conversations, one of them with myself, from our Indian families who were talking about the food that they were bringing to our cafeteria. Really powerful moment for a first grader to be learning about traditions of India, and then to be sitting next to a student that may have food, Indian food. So it was really powerful assembly. As you can see, a lot of our students got to participate, which was great, up on stage. So again, thankful for the PTO for helping us really continue the theme of inclusion and belonging. The MLK celebration, I'm not going to go too much into the district portion, because I know last month you had an update on that, but I will just say, and I do touch upon a little bit about our contribution, the amount of support, the amount of people that were there. I was just absolutely blown away, especially something that, we put together in a relatively short amount of time to see the community come out. So I really appreciate all the MPE families that came out, the staff that came out. As well. And my young friend who is a participant here, she's going to do her role in a few minutes for you. But at NPE, we decided the Friday before to have our own MLK celebration. And my leadership team put it together. The entire school had a role, from song, from dance, through speeches. We honored MLK. We also, if you remember from last year, the homegrown poem. We did a homegrown poem specifically for this event, which was titled "We Dream a World." And this was presented at the district day of service. 200, and we did this January, the week back. So it was basically 6 school days before we had to finalize. We had 236 NPE students contribute to that poem. Couldn't get 236 lines in there, but we had 236 students, and we were just blown away by that. That contributed their ideas for, what do our students dream of the world? And if you were there that day, you saw the PowerPoint presentation, which was absolutely amazing. At the MLK observance, NPE gathered over 200 blessing bags for needy families through the Community Action Agency of Delaware County. So we are so very thankful for the generosity, not just the MPE community, but the larger WSSD community who help us put that together. The cultural proficiency equity team, again, really kind of spearheaded that for the Delaware County Action Agency. And finally, several MPE students participated in a living wax museum. We were really thrilled because we had students who had done this the year before because they hadn't reached that part in 4th grade. So we had students who came back and did their civil rights icon, their performance this year when they actually had performed it last February. And I think we had 4 or 5 students that came out, including my friend Eva here. So we were just thrilled that our students could present that for our community. Okay, as I said, some of our work is also tying into other themes, our PBIS related themes. International Stand Up to Bully Day. This actually was last Friday, and Dr. Marseille was talking about the shortages of staffing. So I was actually in a fourth grade classroom when the lesson plan called for this activity. So I have firsthand knowledge. There was a PowerPoint presentation about bullying versus conflict, right? What does bullying constitute? What is conflict? But more importantly, how can you help each other? How can you be an upstander by looking out and assisting those who may be bullied? And at the conclusion of the PowerPoint, the discussion, we had scenarios that we were talking through, and it was fourth grade classroom. So it was really rich discussion. But at the conclusion, students designed small T-shirts on paper, and pink is the color for the day. A lot of our students and staff wore pink. We had these pink shirts. Students wrote strategies and sayings on the shirts, and they're being prominently displayed kind of throughout the building on some bulletin boards. So we collected them. So it was a wonderful activity. Random Acts of Kindness Day. Our school, many of our classrooms did cards for bringing hope home. I'm not sure if you're familiar. It's actually a local organization where that helps families with family members who may have cancer. And this organization really, from money, from cards and things of that nature, really support. It's a local. It's coming out of someone that I used to know actually from Rose Tree Media, but really does a lot of work kind of locally. So we support them, and a lot of our students on Random Acts of Kindness Day did cards for bringing hope home. So, and finally, I have my friend who's just going to do a very brief presentation for you, Eva Lee, who is going to present Ella Fitzgerald to the board. But I personally want to thank Eva, because I came to her and I said, would you be willing to come out tonight? And we were talking, and this is a really particularly proud moment for me, because we remember when we first met, both of us in kindergarten. I happened to be in the room that particular day, and we were just talking about our interaction, and we both remember that day. So here we are, the end of fifth grade, and she's here to present to you. So I'm going to present Eva Lee, and as I said, she's going to do her Living Wax Museum. It's very brief, but Living Wax Museum presentation on Ella Fitzgerald. So.
Good evening. My name is Ella Fitzgerald. I was born on April 25th, 1917 in Newport News, Virginia. As a child, I started living on the streets. My mother died due to a car accident and injuries, so my stepfather took care of me until April 1933 when I moved to Harlem to live with my aunt. I went to Harlem to sing in a talent show, and I won. The audience loved me, so I went to more talent shows. I am most well known for being the first lady of song in all my songs. Some of my major accomplishments are: I was a very popular American jazz singer and song vocalist. In 1938, I recorded A Tisket, A Tasket. It was very popular. It sold 1 million copies. Personally, I didn't have kids. I passed away on June 15, 1996, in my home in Beverly Hills, California. Thank you.
All right, and just to wrap up, as I said, I hope tonight I was able to kind of operationalize kind of some of the things you hear about the work that we're doing, curricularly, but NPE is really looking at, how can we continue to get better, to promote that all of our students feel safe and that they belong. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I couldn't be prouder of my students, my staff, and the community. So we truly appreciate you having us here tonight. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Heinley and Eva. Eva? I have an Ava, so Eva. Did anyone have any questions or comments? I just want to thank you so much for your leadership. That was wonderful to look at how excited you are and how you're embracing what matters the most for a kid, right? If you can't, I sometimes wonder if our district's going to put out all of the inclusion and belonging folks who come into our professional offices where we work outside of here. I just went through that again, and I really think that maybe by the time we're done, we won't need them coming to our offices once we're adults. I hope that's true. Does anyone have any questions though from Mr.
Well, I want to thank Eva because thank you for reliving the Wax Museum. I didn't get to see it as much as I wanted to as I was making my way through the experiences, but thank you very much. That was absolutely awesome. Thank you.
And for choosing what I think is probably the best musician ever in history. Personal favorite. With that, shall we move then to our next focus topic?
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Marseille.
Well, I will echo individuals who have to follow students as a focus topic. And that it is thank you. It is a hard act to follow. But I wanted to share, can you take it to, that's the back of the. Thank you. So it's really hard to follow, but I wanted to speak briefly about tonight in our recommendation administration with the way in which we think about committee meetings. And there's been many ideations of the way in which this board, probably before some of you sat on this board and probably currently the way in which the district has led a number of meetings. And coming in, there was a history of 2 district meetings a month, one legislative and 1 committee meeting. And those committee meetings included conversations around facilities, finance, curriculum, and personnel. And I believe that there were some of those meetings were happening in the AM, if I'm not mistaken. I'm looking at Mr. Berman, because I think there were times where those meetings took place between 7:30 and 8:30 AM, and they were open to the public. If you can imagine the individuals who were available at that time, probably a little bit challenging for individuals to come out. And there's been some evolution throughout the years with that process. And shifts occurred to the point where committee meetings started to morph into legislative meetings, which are regular board meetings in terms of taking action on particular items as things were coming across the district needing board action, and fewer conversations on those topics. And committee meetings were then scheduled as needed. So when I arrived in the district, prior to my arrival, and I'm looking through your website, like most candidates do, trying to get a better understanding of how you work and anticipate interview questions, right? And saw that a process that was a little bit unfamiliar to me, based on the places I've been where with committees, there were no such thing as to be determined or if needed. They were always standing topic, and there was always a standing meeting. There's always something to talk about. And realize that the rich dialogue that is afforded in committee meetings were being missed. So my recommendation to the board was to move to a process that I was more familiar with, a process that I felt allowed the opportunity to really unpack conversations versus some of the things I was seeing when I was looking and very interested in the position. I was looking at these focus topics. I was trying to figure out the conversations that took place, and very different from the rich conversations around particular committee meetings where I'm accustomed to having, where there's really dialogue back and forth between the community and the board around some really seminal topics. And the focus topics didn't seem to me the way in which, yes, it could be a review, but not necessarily an open dialogue. And it seemed like focus topics became the primary source of conversation in this district versus other places where I've been, where you're really wrestling and pulling in and pulling with conversations in the committee structure that I was accustomed to. I moved forward and asked the board, the real work really takes place in these committee meetings. They need to be standing meetings. They need to be every single month. And they need to have robust agenda topics that help the community and the board better understand the day-to-day to somewhat operations happening in a monthly basis. So we move forward with standing meetings for facilities and finance, where September 15th of 2021 was our first facilities committee meeting, and then followed by, we had another meeting with facilities and finance as well. So what I wanted to share that since then, we've had 17 meetings committed to, and there have been some changes in dates where we had to push some stuff back, but committed to that process. And agenda topics range from as few as 2 topics to as much as 10. Meetings often are 2 hours plus, because that's the type of dialogue that takes place and the level of specificity that we want to bring to those conversations. We also did the same thing for our Educational Affairs Committee, also for our Policy Committee as well. And like those committees, for Ed Affairs, when we started, as few as 1 topic. I think some of you remember that December 7th, 2022 meeting with 198 data slides, which is why there was only 1 topic on that meeting, which we made available to everyone. But it was a rich dialogue. But to some extent, there is this sense that if you're not in the room, how do you capture that? It's hard to capture it in a summary that normally comes 30 days later, which we've put mechanisms into place per the board to, could we push out a lot quicker some summary highlights so people don't have to wait 30 days. So we started doing that as of last month. And what we want to propose and what we like to do is all of our committee meetings, we would like to take the opportunity to stream those meetings. So moving forward, after we get back from spring break, in room B226, we will stream all of our committees. They will be accessible via the YouTube channel. We like the in-person interaction, it'll still be available, but for those who are unable to make that, we will stream that. There are going to be some additional expenditures as the design in the room needs to change a little bit. And there's some additional equipment that we need to purchase. And we're anticipating that's not going to exceed more than $5,300. But part of the largest expenditure is the extent in which we're going to need tech support. We are going to need an individual in that room who will be helping to manage that, because what I don't want to get into is not having someone there, putting some type of stationary system, and then the system goes black and we don't have someone with that level of expertise to help us with that. And we believe that the work to set up, the work to prep, the work to navigate, to break down, we've looked at maxing out at 4 hours per meeting. That's not unrealistic considering that many of you at this table have a healthy energy and healthy questions. And we've had meetings that go 3.5 hours plus, specifically at affairs. And it'll give individuals the opportunity to do that. So I've maxed it at 4 hours, hoping that will not go any greater for every single meeting, but we wanted to make sure that we had enough in the event that we need that tech person there every single meeting for 4 hours. Even though we don't anticipate it, but there are some meetings where you've been part of, and we've had to either table conversations as the longer you get into the night is much more difficult to make critical decisions as you start to getting fatigue. So we're going to purchase some additional hardware. We're going to identify an expert who's going to be in there. Not sure how excited they are about that, but that adds 30 meetings to their calendar now to help support that and any other technical challenges that we may have. The way it's going to look is you're going to see that angle when you are streaming into the room. We know that these committees are heavy PowerPoint based. So we need to make sure that there was an opportunity for individuals to, as we are having conversation, an opportunity to see the screen as well. And we try to put it in a place where you can capture the vast majority of the audience. One of the things that we're going to have to readjust with the board is that there are no wireless mics, which means that the microphone in the camera will pick up absolutely everything. So when you've heard of the term a hot mic, that's exactly what take place. So here, I can press this button and it goes off. In B226, once we hit record, it will pick up your conversation. It will pick up audience members' conversation until we create the space for redesigning our rooms. But quite honestly, that's not going to happen anytime soon because I'm saving the money to redesign classrooms. So sorry about that. You're going to have to move down on the totem pole in terms of prioritizing technical needs for the boardroom. But wanted to say that, and I think when we have our community members in the audience, we'll let them know that as well, that it is a very sensitive mic. And because we didn't have the ability to go too much deeper into creating a system like this, which will add additional dollars, but you will be able to hear the audience, you'll be able to hear the presenters, you'll be able to hear the questions, but it will pick up almost everything in that room. So we'd like to offer that to the board that really supports access, because I think that's the big conversation. I think there's some other things we're going to continue to develop and work on, but it will give community members an opportunity to say, well, these are 11 bullet points that summarize a 2.5-hour meeting. It really doesn't really get to it as much. And I think being able to watch that live, and for those who can't make it live, obviously we'll store that and they'll be able to watch it another time. But I think it moves us as we do this work across the district, whether we're talking about communications, whether we're talking about professional development, whether we're talking about achievement, whether we're talking about opportunity, whether we're talking about inclusion and belonging, that we continue to make steady progress towards our long-term vision. So that is going to be my recommendation for moving forward And that concludes my focus topic, and we'll see if Dr. Walkman, okay, there you have it. It is officially in the universe, so you have to make it happen. Dr. Grande, please make sure we write that down. In terms of that process, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Marseille. So first, I want to thank you and your colleagues in the administration for taking public feedback into consideration, feedback from the board into consideration. This is a conversation that we actually started some time ago, to be honest, and have thought about over the course of quite a long time. And I know that you visited a couple of our other local school districts to see, in fact, how they were operating committee meetings that they were recording. I know when I looked at it, it was being done in some different ways and in different districts. One of the things that was important to me that we did not do is what I saw in at least one other district where it became, while a committee meeting, it was operated exactly like a legislative meeting. So there was no public discourse. Public members went to a podium, they were able to deliver a comment, and the board said, thank you very much. Or the committee, I should say, said, thank you very much. And that was the end of it. And that is absolutely not what we want to, at least certainly not what I want to create in the committee meetings. I want to say one or more, maybe one or two other things, and then I'll pass it around for feedback from other board members. When you went through and commented on kind of how we got here in the transition from the way legislative meetings were run, committee meetings were run, to what we have today, it is night and day. It's a completely different environment as a board member, and I think as a member of the public. When we had 2 meetings a month in which there were rarely committee meetings taking place. There wasn't an educational affairs committee. That's hard to understand how we did not have an educational affairs committee as a school district. So the difference that I have seen in terms of the richness of the conversations, the depth at which we get to our knowledge as a board on the things that we are asked to make decisions about, could not be more different. And I want to thank you for that. As you said, when we walk through these, I mean, we're talking 6 to 8 hours of committee meetings, and many of the board members attend those, whether you're a committee member or not. I see most of you at those meetings. So this board is devoting, in addition to the administration, 6 to 8 hours in committee meetings a month, in addition to our legislative meetings. So we're talking about 8 to 11 hours a month in which we're participating in these public meetings, which doesn't include any of the time that we spend outside of that preparing for the meetings. So again,
Or the community events you go to.
well, that's another thing. We had an entire, 2 pages of community meetings that didn't include even some of the PTO meetings that we're attending. So there's a lot going on. I'm personally excited to be able to move forward in a way that perhaps invites others in a way that we haven't been able to do. But I do still ask those who are able to come out. It makes a difference. And all of us who have, through our professional lives, those of us who are working from home and have now gone back in person, part-time, maybe a couple days a week, or maybe full-time, it is a different experience, an absolute different experience to be side by side with somebody and to have to look at you, in the eye and say, help me understand this one, or maybe we're gonna have to agree to disagree, but we can do that civilly, and I can explain where I'm coming from. It's different when you're in the room. So to the extent that we can, I really encourage people to come out. I really believe that makes a significant difference. So I'll turn it to other board members. Ms. Vogt?
Yeah, so I guess, I guess it's more of a question. Will there be opportunities to see how many people log on? And sort of how much online participation we're getting? The reason I'm asking is, one, this is not a 0-sum game. This costs money, right? And staff time to do this. Two, I worry, and I could be completely wrong about worrying about this, but I do worry that once a mic and cameras are there, the tenor of the meeting changes, the openness, the type of conversation changes. And so, you know, to change that, it's been, you know, really rich in discussion. When it's not being that well attended would be a shame. So those are my major concerns, and I just want to make sure we have some kind of system in place to monitor that and to really make sure that it's worth the money and it's worth the culture change. Also keeping in mind that we oftentimes will present what was presented in committee meetings at the board meetings. So if this goes online, I'm wondering if that will also allow us to not have to repeat things at the legislative meetings as well. So I think there's a lot that needs to be shifted, but also a lot that needs to be monitored, because I am afraid we're gonna spend money and lose something special that occurs in some of these committee meetings by doing this. And again, I could be wrong. I just want to make sure we're monitoring it.
Thank you. Good question. We have been able to monitor and look at the analytics. Matter of fact, when this conversation bear fruit, right? And I made a reference like, you know, I want to receive the input in a way to move forward. And I made reference like, I don't want to fact check everything. But we were able, and we went back multiple years and we were able to see, all right, well, when these were streamed, to what extent was there active participation and where that wasn't, you saw these really ebb and flows. And I think there were points in time, obviously during the pandemic, where that was all that was happening, and then it would drop in, would dip. It would seem like the most watched activities were when we were streaming things related to performances of our students. Then it catapulted to another level. But particular meetings were not as high compared to other events where anything related to students, and there were hundreds and hundreds of people logging on. But we can, as we, which is really one of the fundamental roles of the board, is that as you are making decisions, that you are being mindful with respects to when would you like administration to come back and bring you information collectively when the board decides on that, right? So collectively as a board, in everything we do, you can say, listen, 6 months from now, all right, at the end of the this time next year, can you give us a little update on where we are and how we're tracking that? What do you see, what you don't see? And based on that data, what are things that we can improve on? So we'll be able to give you that information if the board collectively wants to put a check-in date for administration.
No, I saw Ms. Holbert first, and then we'll go to President.
I just wanted to say, I have a comment and a question. My comment is I did go into other school boards and look to see how their committee looked when they were streaming. And I'm glad to hear it sounds like we're going to do a better job, because I don't know if I picked the worst districts that were doing this, or if this is just how it's usually done. But, you know, the mic was back there and I could not understand what people were saying. There was no capturing of the PowerPoint, and you're right, it is so PowerPoint heavy. That was one of my bigger concerns. And also bringing in the audience who might be there and capturing their comments as well. So that really brings me to my question is, are we going to hear community members and their comments and questions kind of, you know, as disembodied voices? Or are they going to somehow make a presence on the, on the camera somehow or another? Because they in particular, the few that spoke up, I either couldn't understand what they were asking, or the board member had to repeat what they had said in order to get it, for the record, kind of. So I just wanted to check with that.
It's pretty consistent with most of what I saw, and I looked at probably at least 10. But go ahead.
Yeah, if I can respond, thank you for saying that. And thank you for doing your due diligence in terms of when we think about what we can learn from others. And that's an example of what we can learn from others when we go and explore. My administrative team was tasked and they picked 2 districts that they had an opportunity to go. Some of them, unfortunately, they had to drive to it because there was no streaming option. And they said, I can't believe I have to sit in another district's committee meeting to see how that works. But we sent them out and said, get us some intel, right? And what we will do in terms of and in addition to getting the equipment and some of the wiring that we need, we will do a number of test runs with that process. I think one of the disadvantages of that room is the inability to see the community member when they ask their question. So if you recall the last slide and it showed you that angle, all of you are aware where community members sit. So it won't capture who's in the audience. It will capture when the board chair goes to community comments. And just like this conversation where Ms. Walkman is picking on or calling us particular or selecting, we need to select that community member. That community member needs to speak. Then once they're done, we determine the extent in which will the board, is that an administrative question or is that a question to the board? And then the board needs to determine the board chair will determine who's going to answer that question. Because once we start getting into 2 people trying to jump in at the same time, it will pick up both of those voices because we don't have this mechanism here. So we will eliminate that process, I believe, based on the system that we're getting and the audio. But we are going to do a number of dry runs in order to do that. And my team members will play role of the board, and then we'll put together a presentation, and then we'll have some individuals sitting in the audience, and we'll do a little dry run.
I will say, for work, I use something that close to probably what you're going to be using, these Bluetooth speakers. They are amazing and they do pick up everything, I will say. So I am familiar.
I'm a little have mixed emotions about streaming the committee meetings because of the type of dialogue that we as board members ask questions to the administrators or to the solicitor, and it's a work in progress. It's not etched in stone. So when it's streamed, then people look at it and they believe that that is what's going to occur, and they don't realize that it's a debate sort of that what we're having. So I just am concerned about that aspect. And like you say with the mic, I know I'm guilty of speaking before
You're called?
I'm called. Or turning to my colleague and saying something or asking a question, and all that is gonna be picked up. I just don't understand why. What the. I'm with you.
Well, I think, oh, sorry.
What is it doing as far as transparency? Because people are invited to come out to the meetings, and if it's something that you are passionate about, then you should make accommodations if you have childcare, or bring the child and bring some activities for them to do. You know, I would rather open it up to that than streaming.
So, thank you for the comments and some of the concerns. I'll say this, we, and I say we in terms of this team, talk about equity, access, and opportunity. Access, right? And part of that is, and as we learn more, and as we hear from our community members, we grow, right? And in our continuous effort to improve every day, we realize that there are members of the community for a myriad of reasons who face challenges that some of us don't. And some of us are extremely blessed, privileged, or just have the opportunity, however you want to describe it. And others can make those particular accommodations in order to do that. I think what this opens up is, because so many things are happening in this district as a result of the phenomenal team that you brought on board and the direction in which you want to move in, right? You hire an individual who does not rest and sit on his laurels. I didn't come here to put up my feet and retire. There's things that we need to do to improve the learning and teaching experiences of our students and our staff, and to strengthen our community. A lot of those conversations happen inside those committee meetings. And individuals want to be afforded the opportunity to say, I just want to tune in. To the extent in which they're unable to make it. There are individuals, and I hear your perspective. Yes, that if you want to talk about advocacy, there's aspects of advocacy that you have to get up and to the extent, get up and march, right? Or get up and physically do that. But there are those who are just as passionate, but just don't have the resources to do that. And I know that obviously the district to some capacity can't provide childcare all the time for that. But I'm sensitive to the fact that when we had Cheyenne, there was no family. So it's Chicago and Atlanta. So there was no one around to watch Cheyenne. We just didn't have that nucleus. And that's just an example in terms of that process. There are individuals who have double shifts and they are coming in like my mother. She would come in really quickly, put something on the stove and say, please keep it on low, don't burn down the house. And she runs out the house, changes, runs out the house, walks up the street on Nassau Street and waits for the bus to catch the second shift, right? Those are things that our families, to some extent, I'm sure there's others that I'm not referencing, that are challenged with, and the ability to be able to, well, yeah, if I can take care of the children, if I can put together and sit here and fold clothes and have that in front of me, I feel like I'm somewhat engaged in the process, or I'm glad that I can go back to it and watch it in its entirety when I have the opportunity to do that. So I hope that I hope it opens doors versus those who would sometimes come and decide, oh, I don't need to get in my car and drive I don't know, what's the farthest drive? My drive is 7 minutes. I don't know. What's the farthest drive? No, not you. You don't live in the community. What's the farthest drive, right? 10, 11 minutes. So maybe people don't feel like that, especially on bad weather days, right? Where individuals are like, I'm not coming. But they can sit at the house and do that. So I can understand that, but I do think in our efforts, as we're not there yet, we're nowhere near that. We're trying to be better than we were yesterday. This is an attempt, and we said all to our educators, we just want a commitment that you're trying to be better than you were yesterday. This is an attempt to be a little bit better with the word of access than we were before.
Well, if you look, go to the board meetings that are on YouTube, and I don't know how, unless somebody subscribes to the channel, then that's how you can tell how many people are active. Because sometimes there's only like 2 thumbs up, like,
I think you can see how many people have logged on to watch it. So as long as we track that.
Yeah,
make
you
sure
can
it's
see how
not
many
like
people have
one
actually
person.
logged in to watch that.
You can do that now. Well, if you just go to the YouTube channel, it'll show you how many views there have been. It's
but
different than the likes, like a like.
the thing is that you're doing it on YouTube, but it doesn't allow, when you just look at it, to ask the question. How do they then ask the question? Do they email you as the superintendent that they have a question about?
That's another do better tomorrow than today. We have not moved into that direction where we would create the condition to solicit that type of audio feedback. We'd have to think very differently about the space and the other ways in which to do that.
Just be watching.
Just like a board meeting today. Some people will reach out and send an email to us and at any point in time, or give us a phone call about something that might come to a board meeting. Some people will come in person. It would essentially be the same. I hear where you're coming from for sure. And have had some of those same concerns.
Yeah, I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm
Where I'm coming down, and I know, I think Dr. Grande wants to talk to you is I appreciate what Dr. Marseille said too, that for some families, it could be very difficult to come. It might be, you might, some of our, I've had parents who have children with significant special needs talk to me about the fact that coming to things in the evening is actually more difficult because during the day, their child might be in an educational setting. Thank you. Can't come up with my words tonight. In an educational setting, so they can perhaps, come to things that are during the day, but in the evening, that is the primary caregiver for someone with significant needs. It can be very difficult to come to a meeting. So like, as you said, if we're asking others and we as a board, and I really do appreciate where you're coming from, Nanette, and And I do think we need to take a look and see, are people actually watching? Is it worth the time and the investment of the dollars? They're nominal in the scheme of things, but if we're asking others to change and to do things differently and to think differently, we're challenging our entire district to do that every day. We're challenging the administration, we're challenging our teachers to do that every day. Then for me, it's kind of holding the mirror up to ourselves. We've had the feedback, and if we don't try, we'll never know if it worked or not. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We learn from it, we adjust and figure out what to do. But I do agree.
But
we need to-
how will you, if it doesn't work, is this like a pilot program?
Well, I
So
think-
you're gonna have so many meetings that are televised on YouTube to say after this amount
Mhm.
of meetings, we're gonna assess how beneficial it was to the public.
I think my only concern is the extent in which for those consistent members of the community who come out periodically for meetings, I'm hoping it's not a deterrent for them to say, I'm gonna watch it. And if I have a pressing question or concern, now that I've watched it, I know who to reach out to versus them coming to the meeting. What I do believe will happen is that you will see an uptick in the number of people who are hitting that channel to watch it, whether or not they're sitting there for the 2 hours directly in front of it and watching it, whether they're putting in the background, waiting to hear a trigger word in terms of what they say. Let me go and catch that. I think it gives them the opportunity to do that. My only concern to the extent which the model in which we are proposing to move forward with and reviewing that in terms of participation, which we don't track that now here. None of the board members have ever asked me, what's the participation rate of individuals on a Monday regular meeting, and is it really working, right? And if it's not, maybe we shouldn't do it at all, right? So I don't think that is a metrics that we've been asking, the board has asked me to look into and that we've never done. My concern is those who tend to normally come, I hope it doesn't dissuade them in terms of the ease to be able to say, hey, tonight's not the night, I just can kick up my feet and kind of watch it from my house, because I
Yeah, so
do.
then we have an empty room because people elect to stay home and watch it.
Dr. Walker.
Dr. Watson. Well, can I say, Dr. Grande was waiting for an opportunity. If okay.
That's all right. I do want to emphasize and reiterate what you are saying, Dr. Marseille, because I would like to say that many of the decisions that we make on the board are influenced by community members. And in those committee meetings, when community members speak and we have that back and forth conversation, and it's in the moment, and they talk about the stories of their children, and they talk about what impacts their family, and they talk about how this decision is going to not just affect them, but their neighbors, and how this is happening in the community. Teachers have come to our meetings. It is so critically important for me as a board member to hear those voices. I know that sometimes those voices struggle with how to, put those pieces together, that making changes for us is not always easy, but that's our job and that's how we are moving forward. But if we don't hear what our community is asking for and the impact, and I would say, we get data, from our community members who show up and present it to us, and it makes a difference. So my concern and my hope for the community is that people will continue to come. It is so very important for us to hear your voice, to hear everyone's voice because that's how we learn. And I think I appreciate so much the comments when our community members come and they make comments. So I hope very much, I think we have to do this. I know we have to go in this direction. I know for all the reasons that Dr. Marseille has just listed, that this is so important for community people to hear this and then maybe communicate with us at a later date. But boy, there is nothing like that in the room, you know, in the presence of the community. It just is such a valuable experience. Thank you. That's my comment.
Would you mind if I jumped in right now? Because I
Thank
just
you
want
very much.
to, is that,
You have a hot mic?
I have a hot mic. I have a hot mic. And I just want to piggyback off of that. So first I want to say, thank you for presenting this, and for the work that went into it. I originally, so in preparation for this, I also, you know, as we all did, I'm sure, looked through and saw what other schools and districts are doing. And in addition, I tried to be more intentional about my conversations with community members around these topics. And I will say originally, I shared some of the similar concerns that were presented about cost benefit and how many people are tuning in. And one of the things that I heard is that some of those numbers might be misleading, in that you may have a handful of people tuning in that are then sharing that information via social media or other outlets. So I just want to caution us to kind of, and that kind of opened my mind to that idea that those numbers may not really speak to who is exactly getting that information, maybe through secondhand means. Did you have a question, Candy?
Meaning they're sharing the link or
No,
they're
no,
doing
meaning
their
they're-
own personal view of the
Meaning
meeting
they're
and sharing
reporting
it.
out on it some form or
Yeah,
other.
that's not my favorite, but
Oh,
okay.
right. So, well, nonetheless.
You're saying they're summarizing based on what they watched and then sharing, or
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm saying that they're watching the meeting and perhaps disseminating their perception of the meeting to the community. So meaning that more community members may be accessing that meeting than we actually think.
I would hope that if it's streamed, that people are gonna access it on their
I would
own
as
so
well.
that they can put their own lens
would
on
as
it
well.
independently.
I'm just saying, you know, that I think the numbers might be misleading.
I agree.
And that conversation or two opened my mind to that idea. But the other thing I want to say is piggybacking off of what you just said, Mary Jo, which is that, you know, I'll speak for me personally. This is a cognitive enterprise starting this, you know, in this position. It's an incredible amount of information to digest. And but you know, forefront in my mind is also the fact that we're community representatives. And so I'm thinking about, I'm excited that we're taking this step, but I hope it's the beginning of trying to figure out ways to better engage with the community that we represent. Because I feel that I can't, you know, we can't represent a community that we're not engaged with. And while this is a great first step, I'm still concerned about how we're going to look at ways to further engage with the community, essentially. You know, dialogue and two-way communication. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of, you know, and it's not just engagement for the sake of me being a better representative. I think that, you know, part of the, you know, we get these updates from the Department of Ed. And recently there was a piece about how engagement isn't just about, engagement helps support kids. It helps support kids. When families are engaged, kids do better. So I just want to keep an eye on that. You know, there were other things that were kind of floated around in terms of making public comment more accessible for the community. I hope we can continue to explore that. I hope we, you know, I was open-minded to the idea of a listening session. What concerns me about that is that I still wonder if there will be pockets of the community that we aren't going to reach, because it's another meeting that we're, you know, offering that may or may not be something that is going to work. for families.
Mr. Lay, I would agree with you, and I think we need to come to terms that absolutely there are pockets of the community that we're not reaching. right? All the data suggests that there are pockets of the community that we're not reaching. The same way all the data suggests there are pockets of children that we are not reaching. We haven't reached them for a very, very long time. And part of our work is how do we inch closer to that particular work? So engagement with the community in the way in which you're struggling with it is the same way educators are struggling with what does engagement look like inside the classroom? And what is the impact of passive engagement to the learning experience? What is the impact of passive engagement to the civic process in terms of that? So unfortunately, yes, the answer is we're not. In many ways in which we're not doing it for others, but part of our role is to take pieces of that big pie and move it, or take a piece of that boulder and begin to move it a little bit further down the road. And as long as we are making steady progress towards those particular areas, I think that's the first step. Is, are we moving forward? And after we do this, what's the next in terms of increasing further engagement? So we do it, we collect data, we analyze, we hear. You're going to hear from your community members. They're going to say, hey, that's a good first step. Let's move into phase 2, right? The same way we are doing that inside the classroom. It's a good first step. Let's move to version 2.0 and then to version 3.0.
Can I just say real quickly, though, I'm not hearing from community members, and that's what feels like a disconnect for me. It surprised me about starting in this role. You know, I thought that I would be hearing from community members, and I can't put my finger on why. I'm not. So I'm still thinking about it. I don't have an easy answer. I don't have it just feels like a disconnect for me.
Well,
and
how long have you been on the board?
It will come.
Well, you know, obviously.
Right.
You know, but
No, I say that because PSBA speaks to the way in which board members need to reimagine the way in which they engage with the community. And in some of the PSBA sessions, when you are interacting with your colleagues across the state, they will have a very different perspective in terms of the amount. I know that in particular communities, there are particular board members where it seems like all the communication is going to that particular individual, right? And for some reason, a pocket of the community feels that this is the person who I'm going to call. And there are times where I realize, wow, I guess no one's saying anything to you yet, right? I guess it's not that, something's very different. So you are going to see, depending on regions, the way in which individuals will reach out. But I do say that, and then it speaks to then, is there stuff that I need to do differently? Or as I'm learning through this particular process?
I want to be clear, though, I'm not always saying that I'm putting the onus on the community members to reach out to me. I want to be very clear about that. I just have been thinking through more intentionally how to create better engagement with them.
Sure.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Thank you for that. I want to make sure that Dr. Grandi has his opportunity to speak to you. And then if we can, looking at the time and thinking that we've spent a really long time talking about this, or we doesn't have to be the only time we talk about it, but if we could try to wrap this up by 9, I think that would be a good thing. Dr. Grandi.
I had 20 minutes of comments to make. I'll cut it down to 19.
She just gave you 5, Dr.
Yeah.
Grandi.
I'm going to keep this really short, which is to say, let's try it. My only caveat is we will be increasing the number of times we're using technology 5-fold. And if something fails on the night of a committee meeting, I would suggest that we still hold the meeting. That it's not a reason if we have like a sudden problem where a camera is not functioning or somebody's not available at the last minute, that somehow the meeting shouldn't go on. So that'll happen at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah, it will.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, terrific point. Yeah. So this has been a very good dialogue across the board. I'm hearing a general consensus with some concerns about moving forward with the recommendation. I think that the consensus is to move forward, but to watch carefully if it changes the nature of the engagement, the nature of the dialogue, look at how many people are in fact watching, and come back and talk about this again. And what we can decide at another point, how many months should go by before we revisit. Sound very good? All right. Again, I really do appreciate everybody's really thoughtful participation in the dialogue. Thank you. All right. Wow. Now we get to start the other parts of the agenda.
We can start the meeting.
Yeah, we can start the actual meeting. 2 hours in. All right, here we go. First up, we have board announcements, and I would share that the board did meet in an executive session prior to this evening's meeting, and I believe that's the only announcement that we have this evening. Next up, we have audience recognition for response to items for action on the agenda. Wait, switch papers. A little speech that goes with this one. Okay, so this is the time on the agenda where we give the opportunity for public comment for items on the agenda. We'll have time later for topics that are not on the agenda. And as a reminder, public comments a time for district residents and taxpayers to speak to the board about an issue that is before the board or may come before the board. Time for us to listen, hear perspectives and experiences. And while we can't answer questions necessarily at the meeting, there's always an opportunity for follow-up after the meeting if there's a specific question for the district. And as is our custom, because we want to give people an opportunity to be heard, we will continue to follow our 3-minute time limit, and we'll give a heads up at that 1-minute limit. So with that, is there anyone who would like to speak? Mr. Sartor. If you could just state your name and you know the drill. Yeah.
Dave Sartor, Morris Lane in Wallingford. First of all, I applaud the idea of streaming the meetings. I do like that idea, but that's not the reason why I was actually here this evening. I just wanted to know during your discussion later on, when you're in the finance section of the meeting, if we could hear more discussion on the need for the contract with the MCIU. I mean, I attended the last finance meeting and wasn't mentioned, and I'd like to understand why we feel the need that we need to do that. It seems like the auditor that finished auditing our books back in I forget what month it was, and the report we received at the January meeting that I was out, they pretty much, my words, gave the thumbs up with the business office and the way things were run. And I know they have to check all the math and do all that, but they do more than that. And this seems like we're paying another group to do something very similar to what the auditor already did. And I'm just wondering what changed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sartor. We could respond to that one as we bring that one up. I'll ask for we'll take comments on that one from the board and from Dr. Marseille when we get to that one. Yes, we could do that. So there was a request from Ms. Vode because the meeting is running quite long. If we could take public comment for items that are not on tonight's agenda early as well. So before I move to that, is there anyone else who wanted to speak about an item that is on tonight's agenda? Okay, then we will go ahead and take, yep. On the agenda, I might have said that incorrectly. Anyone else who wants to speak to an item on the agenda for action? And I see none. So then I did already see a hand for items that are not on the agenda for action. So if you would mind come up to the podium and if you could state your full name and the street upon which you live.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alexandra Detweiler. I'm from Crest Lane in Swarthmore. In the spirit of being allotted 3 minutes, I promise I can keep it short, but also in the spirit of, what does my voice represent? How do people disseminate information? Probably about 40 voices went into me collaborating and figuring out kind of what I was going to say and how I wanted to present it today. as just putting something on the radar. Knowing that there was a forum at an upcoming facilities meeting, as well as ongoing conversation to talk about budgets and facilities, there'd be an opportunity then as well. I am part of the Haven Swim and Dive community. I have a child that swims on the high school team, and I also have a middle schooler who plays field sports. So, the direction that this is going is, as our district is actively looking to develop the athletic fields and facilities refurbishments, there is part of the general community that I'm representing tonight that would like to ensure that any financial decisions are taking into consideration the pool. I see nods of heads. That's great. I think everyone knows the moratorium is 50 some odd years old. I think those of us in the community that understood refurbishments were happening in the past, and this was put to the side as the pandemic hit, want to know, will that come back on the radar? There are pool deck drains that are clogged. There are noxious fumes that aren't being drained properly. The air circulation is, at this point, I'm not part of the EPA. I can't comment on, the levels of toxicity, but I do spend a lot of time there and, leave with a massive headache. Also acknowledging that there is more to consider than just, is there funding, but how do we raise funding? One of the things that was put into consideration is that Woolery, which is a third-party management firm, not just our school district, but other pools in the area, use them. Many of our children in the community have learned to swim through swim lessons that happened through Woolery. There are means to make this pool profitable. There are means to find a way to open up our pool, whether it's from rentals, whether it's from birthday parties, whether it's from swim lessons. Of course, this isn't just as simple because there is a third-party management involved. Our community ask is that although there is a third-party company involved with those decisions, the overall facility belongs to us in the community, and the overseeing of the third-party company, for better or for worse, or what everyone does think about it, needs to be made by this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to comment around an item not on tonight's agenda for action? Mr. Sartor. Not on the agenda. Thought you weren't going to comment after all.
Morris Lane, Dave Sartor. Just very briefly, it's along the lines of what I said earlier about I applaud the idea of televising the meetings. Coming to these meetings is tricky. I used to be on that side and I've been on this side recently. And at times the mic and the television camera are intimidating. So some people won't come just because of those. I'm not saying you should stop doing that, but it's always hard to get those type of folks to come out. I would like to understand that we would capture the views, not just during the live streaming, but if people watch it later. Is that correct? Okay, good. One thing that we did do when Kyle and I were on the board was when we received emails from the community, unless it was very specific to a child and an issue, our board president would have a pile of letters that they would summarize very briefly. Received a letter from a gentleman in Rutledge about some topic. We did that fairly often, so at least the community saw that we were reading, seeing emails, and acknowledging their receipt. So because sometimes it's hard to make sure you get back to everyone with a follow-up email. But there are other things that we can do to assure the community we hear you, we're listening to you, we acknowledge your comments. We may not solve, the board president summarized very briefly, basically the intent of the email. So Oh, and that's the last thing. So maybe if we can bring back that practice, that might be helpful too. I will say some of the streaming may also, it might not be as helpful in that if I've harped on this, I'm going to harp on it again. The timeliness of agendas. I don't come to meetings unless there's an agenda item I'm interested in. But if it's only put up a day or 2 or 3 days before the meeting, I may not have enough time to look at it, absorb it, formulate my ideas, and then show up to the meeting or stream it. So we've got to get those agendas out sooner as best we can. And lastly, when Kyle and I were on the board, we didn't have time limits. I know we're covered by law. We didn't have time limits. We didn't let people go on forever and ever and ever, especially if it, but you know what? That's intimidating to get a sign put up and say, I have 1 minute left. People aren't going to come up and talk to you because the pressure of getting something said in 3 minutes is impossible. So you guys can end that right away if you want. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Paul Jacobs of Reinhard Road. And I really think this is a great decision to move forward to putting these online. I've already gotten messages from people that asked me to be here tonight saying that they're excited to see that you're doing this and that this is going to be a really positive direction. I wanted to share some stories. So my involvement is mostly with the township. And I talked to a township board of commissioners several years ago. Why don't you put these on YouTube? And he said many of the same fears you have, that it will change the character of the conversation. It'll change the number of people that participate. And then the pandemic happened and they went online and they're still available on YouTube. And what we've seen at the township is that it really hasn't changed the character of the discussion. It's changed maybe the number of people in attendance, but it hasn't changed the number of people commenting. I mean, that's remained pretty much where it was before. It's just changed the people sitting in the audience and watching because, you know, a lot of us don't have cable anymore to watch these things live. So this is a really good change. I don't think it's going to cause the problems you see. I think having the information out there is a good thing. If you don't put the information out there, people will still talk about it. And I'll get into that later. The other thing I want to share is when you do the facilities meeting, I am at the Environmental Advisory Committee. Those meetings happen the same night. I can never participate in 2 things at the same time. It's not possible. When I get home from work, one of the first things my son usually asks me is, do you have a meeting tonight? Because I'm at meetings. I mean, you guys understand that all the time. And what I said, yeah, I have a meeting I have to go to. People told me I should be there. And his quote to me was, the world shouldn't need you to go to every meeting. That is what he told me. And that hurt. Okay. And I'm still here, but it hurt. So I wanted to share that. I think this is great. One of the things I do for the township meetings, I will watch the meeting at 5 in the morning before he's awake, so that it doesn't take any time that we have together. And I think that's great for our family. The other thing I want to say, I don't know if you're going to discuss this later tonight, but there's been a lot of talk about the payroll issue. There's a lot of discussion out in the community happening. And if you don't say something about it, people are going to keep talking about it. So I really encourage you to make a statement. I don't know if you're planning to later, but I really encourage you to say something. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. Did you want to?
Can I comment on Mr. Jacobs' comment about did you say your son?
Yeah.
Yeah, and talk about I remember when my daughter said, you have another meeting. You're never home. You always have a meeting. And as a dad, you're like, ouch, in terms of that process. So of several things you said resonated with me, but that really resonated with me. Thank you for your comments.
Yep. I think I got that one tonight too as well. So what do you mean you have another one? Thank you. Any other comments for items not on this evening's agenda for action? All right, seeing none, we'll continue then with the rest of the agenda. So the first item up for action then is the minutes of the January 23rd, 2023 regular board meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Ms. Vogt, thank you. And do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Grante. Any comments this evening? Hearing none. Ms. Elias, if you'll please take the roll call.
Dr. Grande,
Aye.
Mr. Henry,
Aye.
Mrs. Holbert,
Aye.
Mr. Kudis,
Aye.
Mrs. Dole,
Aye.
Mrs. Vogt,
Aye.
Ms. Witset,
Aye.
Ms. Wachowski Smith,
Abstain.
and Mrs. Walkman.
Aye.
The minutes pass 8-0 with one abstention.
Thank you. All right, next up is committee reports, which might be a part of our agenda we want to rethink as we move forward because they take a lot of time. And it is 9:15. So I am going to ask folks to go through these, if you can do so at your quickest but appropriate speed. And the educational affairs is first, and Ms. Witkowski Smith, are you going to offer?
I am, thank you. Yes, our meeting was held on February 1st at 7 p.m. and B226 at Strathaven Middle School. Board committee members were there. I was absent at that meeting. Everyone else that should have been there was there, and there, that took a paragraph. The two main items on the agenda for Ed Affairs Committee meeting held on February 1st in B226 at the middle school were a presentation about Schoology, was given by Adam Lawson and Janet Sankar, both from Power School. They were also joined by Dr. Conley, Mr. Centroni, and Mr. Kroll. A presentation on engineering is elementary was given by Mr. Andrew Benzing. There's also an update about strategic planning process and about upcoming community review meetings that are geared to maximize the participation of families, guardians, community members, among other major stakeholders. Dates, times, and locations for these meetings will be publicized on the district website. The Schoology presentation. Dr. Connolly and Mr. Citroni and Mr. Kroll were joined by two representatives from Schoology, Ms. Janet Sankar and Mr. Adam Larson, to share an overview of the demonstration of Schoology learning management system. Dr. Conley explained the process of how Schoology was chosen as a learning management system. Curriculum Council was the space where teachers and administrations were given the opportunity to explore LMSs and to identify one platform, Schoology, that best fits the needs of the district. Mr. Citroni clarified that Power School is the umbrella company and Schoology is one of the features under Power School. Mr. Kroll highlighted the district's plans for the creation of a cadre of Schoology scholars and explained who Schoology scholars will be. Schoology scholars are a cohort of teachers who will help lead the training and implementation of Schoology at the building level. Mr. Kroll talked about the summer work that is being planned and to implement Schoology. Ms. Shankar and Ms. Lawson provided a demonstration of Schoology from the perspectives of the learner, teacher, and parent. Mr. Benzing then presented on engineering is elementary, and he provided the overview, which is a hands-on inquiry-based model designed by the Boston Museum of Science. Mr. Benzing highlighted the structure of the unit, reviewed basic concepts, and facilitated a hands-on EIE activity. In this current pilot phase, one teacher at each grade level in each building is running a unit on engineering based on the engineering design process. Mr. Benzing also highlighted how this works and intended to seamlessly build to secondary grades, highlighting the Principles of Engineering elective course for Strathaven High School that will be offered for the first time in 23-24 academic year. Mr. Benzing also shared a possible future consideration, computer literacy special courses in grades 6 through 8. The next Ed Affairs meeting, which you are all invited to attend, is being held on March 1st at 7 p.m. in room B226 in the middle school. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Next up, we have Facilities and Finance, Dr. Grande.
Facilities and Finance met last Wednesday, February 22nd. Most of our conversation was facilities took up more time. We got some highlights of ongoing projects. One of them is a crosswalk study looking at the Coppels Lane crossing between the middle school and high school and some of the hazards there. Lighting replacements are underway from our energy projects in the district. Space studies are ongoing, but the committees haven't seen a report yet. And as was mentioned in one of our comments, there's been a lot of discussion about athletic fields, as Dr. Marseille mentioned as well. So we are in the process of trying to put plans in place for King Field, hopefully for this summer, in terms of turf replacement and figure out what the scope is beyond the turf itself. And then also a broader athletics plan. There is a meeting that Dr. Marseille mentioned for the community on Thursday, March 2nd at 7 o'clock at the high school in the cafeteria. In the pipeline for projects, partial roof replacement at NPE is down the road, signage at the middle school and high school, and sealing of some parking lots at SRS in the middle school. There was a proposal put forward by the administration in terms of updating our rental fees across our facilities. There was some feedback on that proposal, and the administration is working on refining that. The finance portion of the committee meeting provided a year-to-date update on the budget, as well as the budget planning for next year, which is still in its relatively early stages, but the draft that was presented at that meeting included 5 high priority positions, including some English and math specialists, counselor, and an athletic director position. And that working draft of the budget, which again is still in its very early stages, was at least modeled on the Act 1 index of 4.1%. That's it.
Thank you, Dr. Grundy. Next up, policy, Mrs. Holbert.
I'm afraid I'm not going to be quite as brief as Dr. Grande was. I'm sorry about that. So the policy committee met on Monday, January 30th. It was well attended by parents and community members there to discuss policy 206 regarding attendance areas and assignment within the district. The committee received a historical review of the policy from Dr. Conley and advice on the distinction between a policy and an administration regulation from our counsel at Diasio. Community members' primary concern related to elementary aged children having to attend different elementary schools due to lack of space at a particular school. Within our district, class size is capped at 23 for kindergarten through 2nd grade and 27 students for 3rd grade through 5th grade. Parents advocated for a system where younger siblings be given priority to attend the same school as their older siblings. Several parents also asked the district to consider creating full-day kindergarten as an option. And finally, they also shared a desire to be kept up to date through more timely and comprehensive communication methods. At the end of the discussion, policy committee members asked the administration to return with another draft policy 206, along with its accompanying administrative regulations that includes language related to priority for siblings. After the discussion about policy 206, the committee approved 2nd readings for the following policies to be voted on tonight. These are policy 205 for postgraduate students. This policy makes clear that the district does not offer educational services to residents past the time they are legally allowed to be enrolled. Policy 330, overtime. This policy requires that overtime be paid when required by law. Much of the original language was operational in nature, so language relating to how overtime is approved and other issues is being moved to administrative regulations. Policy 338, sabbatical leave. This policy combines 2 policies related to sabbatical leave for restoration of health purposes and professional development purposes. Administrative regulations relating to such issues as employer and employee responsibilities during and after sabbatical leave have been written. Policy 338.1, compensated professional leaves, is being recommended for repeal because it has been combined with policy 338. And finally, policy 349, resignation, was revised to allow the superintendent to accept resignations without board action. This is a best practice, as sometimes it is in the best interests of the district to accept a resignation immediately without waiting for the next board meeting. Administrative regulations have also been created for this policy. Oh, I'm sorry. One more quick thing. Our next policy committee meeting is on Thursday, March 9th at 7 o'clock. We usually meet in room B 226 in the middle school, but not saying for sure as we had a last minute change last time. So that's plan A. We'll see how that works out. I encourage, it's going to be here. Breaking news. It's going to be here at the library. So be here. And I, as usual, encourage everyone to attend. It's going to be a great time.
Thank you, Ms. Solbert. Next is Wellness Advisory. Mrs. Dolly, we have? It has
Yeah, I
not
think
met.
Wendy, you reported out on it last time, right? Yeah.
Okay, no new meeting. Thank you. Okay, that takes us then to PSBA. Back to Ms. Bukowski-Smith.
Okay, Pennsylvania School Boards Association has just released their 2023 State of Education in Pennsylvania report. And I'm sharing some of the highlights of that report that is most of interest to our district, and some identified challenges by school districts across the state, identified 4 challenges, which seem to be the exact ones that we are facing. Number 1 challenge is staffing, and that is a problem really across the state and across the country. The second issue that most school districts have identified is mental health, and mental health of the students and the staff that they're talking about is becoming a very critical issue in the state and across the country. The third is, of course, budgeting pressures, and that schools are facing to address these issues without sufficient funds to take care of what they're identifying as their priorities, and aging infrastructure. So that is the 4th major area. There's more on that list. Those are the big 4. In the area of staffing shortages, 92% of school districts reported are experiencing shortages at this time, mostly in the area of substitute teachers, special education, English language learners. So that is also instructional aides, drivers, and other staff. So it is that way across the board. The second is meeting the needs of students who have mental health issues. So with student mental health being such a pressing issue, many school districts have worked to expand their programs and services to address the growing need. Further, most all school districts, 97% of them, are now providing increased mental health education or school-wide programming. Despite the multitude of challenges that schools are facing, schools are continuing to be safe places, according to the people leading it. And providing this support is helping students feel safe in school, so that it's actually effective. But as federal funding for these programs ends, it will be difficult for districts to continue this level of programming. And budget pressures, of course, are forcing tough choices for districts when asked to select the actions that school districts would be taking due to budget pressures. Raising property taxes and drawing from fund balance were selected most frequently by districts. The priority for most districts is to avoid cutting student programs. On budget sharing, state and local split, if you look at the school districts where they reside, the percentage of state and local funding for each school reveals that the reliance on local revenues is greatest for suburban school districts, and that many rural and urban school districts are more reliant on the state for funding. So Pennsylvania continues to be one of the states with the lowest contributions to education funding. And so mandated expenses right now, mandated by the state, are outpacing revenues provided by the state. So the impact of pension costs, charter school tuition, and special education, and that on local taxpayers and students becomes clearer when comparing state revenues intended to help cover those expenses with the actual increase in those mandated costs. Spending on those three mandates alone exceeded state and federal revenues by 3.7 billion. So the costs were $3.7 billion dollars more than what the state provided across the state. In a historic victory for students on February 7th, 2023, and I think we talked about this earlier, the Commonwealth Court ruled that Pennsylvania's current student funding system is unconstitutional. It will be up to our state legislature to create new funding formula for PA schools. And on the last part is aging school buildings. And nearly 3/4 of a survey respondents stated that one or more of their school district's buildings were in need of major repair or replacement. Many parents are also starting to notice the deterioration of their schools' buildings, with less than 1/3 of parents classifying their child's school as in excellent condition. So that's, you know, it's a problem across the state. Lack of state reimbursement is a barrier to school improvements. Despite creating a new school construction and renovation reimbursement program in Act 70 of 2019, no state funding has been appropriated to finance new projects. So they passed the law, but they didn't fund it. And this lack of state reimbursement is a barrier to school in construction and renovation for most school districts. And those are the highlights. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Witkowski-Smith. It's a little sobering to listen to, is it not? Next up, we have Delaware County Community College. Ms. Whitsett, any news there?
They held a meeting to select the board of trustees, but unfortunately, because I was battling COVID, I was unable to attend the meeting. So I will have the names of the new trustees at the next board meeting.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Kudis for DCIU.
The permit process is underway for the expansion, the renovation and expansion of the Fulcroft facility. RFPs should go out in the next couple months.
Thank you very much. And finally, Delaware County School Board Legislative Council, Ms. Holberg.
Just very briefly, the day before we had our February meeting, the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania issued its decision regarding William Penn School District versus the Commonwealth. So since William Penn School District is in Delaware County, there was much discussion about that. But we've already also touched on that several times. The Senate, just as a heads up, the Senate Education Committee is holding a meeting about the teacher shortage and how the Commonwealth can help alleviate it on tomorrow, February 28th. The Department of Education is working on creating a teacher preparation program of studies that can be offered to all high school students considering teaching as a profession. And we've heard a little bit about this before. In the meantime, DCIU is already moving forward with the Teacher Preparation Academy that is recruiting high school students. So that's it.
Thank you. All right, that takes us to personnel, and we have 16 items this evening in personnel. Is there any item that anyone would like to separate from the rest in terms of voting action? We will have time for comment before we take the final vote. I see none. All right, first up, we have resignations of Mary Martin, Business Administrator. In certified staff, we have Susan McAndrews, special education teacher at the high school, Gabriel Morrison, school psychologist at the middle school. And then in non-certified staff, we have Kathy Salem, instructional support at West. Sorry for that. And we have Carol Mark, payroll and accounting specialist, Liam Gallagher, accounting supervisor, and Jose Siri, bus driver. Second, in appointments, we have the appointment to approve the emergency PSERS engagement of Ken King as interim business administrator effective February 21st, 2023. And we also have the appointment of Rachel Cotton, Communications and Community Relations Liaison. And in non-certified staff, we have the appointment of David Kopp, Safety and Security Aide at the high school. Next, we have leaves of absence as stipulated in the agenda. We have changes of assignment also as stipulated. Payment of unused sick days as stipulated, excuse me. Curriculum supplementals as attached in the agenda. We have mentor appointments 2022, 2023 mentor appointments as attached. We have the approval of 2022, 2023 conference requests as attached. We have the approval of 2022, 2023 activities supplementals as attached. The approval of 2022, 2023 spring athletic curriculum supplementals also as attached. We have the approval of 2022, 2023 activities advisor appointments as attached. We have the approval of the Saturday detention program as attached. And this is for the approval of compensation, specific compensation for staff members for the Saturday detention program itself. We have the approval of the accompanist at Strathaven High School, also as attached. And the approval of the 2023 summer band and string program as attached. The approval of under new teacher academy, the approval of Jennifer McDonald professional development for the new teacher academy. We have under English language learners, the approval of curriculum hours for two staff, Erica Fazoli and Helena Kim for professional development for ELL learners. All items are as attached or as otherwise stipulated in the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Pope. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Holbert. Sorry, late. Do I have any comments? Mr. Lee?
Yeah, so with regards to item H, and Dr. Marseille, I had asked you this directly, so I just thought maybe for the good of the community, I was wondering if you could just sort of explain the process for budgeting for the conferences, you know, how that works.
Yeah.
And
We submitted budget to the board last time of the year in June, indicating here's the dollars and line items for professional development. From there, we decide the extent and what are the professional experiences we want to offer to our staff and our administrators.
with regards to some of these particular requests, will there be an opportunity to hear back on, I mean, you know, I'm obviously new and learning, and I'm learning about the learning journeys. And I'd love to hear more about, you know, perhaps the outcomes or just hear a little bit more about.
Yes,
what
we
the
will make
learning
that happen.
was.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
But I want to share with you that you've approved a lot of professional development throughout the
Yes.
year. So is it the learning journeys that you have more specific questions about, or do you want to think about professional development in general?
Well,
Since,
I'm still learning about the process in general.
Okay.
There's that. But these particular requests just stood out to me just in terms of the dollar amount. So
Sure.
I thought it was worth just sort of maybe educating myself and maybe again for the good of the community, just about what the learning was that took place on the journeys.
yes, we had plans at affairs to create the space. We had plans to create the space if, well, we might be going to streaming, so there won't be a significant need to repeat the presentation here as a focus topic, but we'll create that opportunity.
Thank
Yes,
you. Thanks.
and we'll bring some of our staff members who will speak to those experiences as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. I would note too that we have put more intentional professional development into our planning, into our budgets. I would say over the last two budgets now or one budget. How many budgets have you been through? You've only been here for one. It feels like 10 years probably already. But we've done a lot in professional development, which I think speaks to what you talked about, frankly, at the beginning of the meeting, and the need to continuously invest in professional development in order to not just attract, but to maintain staff, to help them. The world is not standing still while we're educating our students. Right?
Yes.
And what I have seen as a board member is a lot of focus in the areas of that we've identified through our audits as areas of opportunity. So some of the work I want to say in like the English language learner, and I'm not going to remember the right terminology here, but for students that are with some reading disabilities. Also, there's been some professional development there for
Yes.
teachers and staff. A lot in the STEM area, as we're, I don't know how many years behind in developing a STEM program, 20? Easily.
Well, I think it's the nature in which it becomes a framework for our district. I think there are some great work that's been happening in pockets. Great efforts made by our teachers. I think until this team was put into place, we didn't have a systemic way of thinking about STEM, and that's why we presented to the board and asked for a director of STEM to prioritize and lead that. I'm going to share with this board that in my dossier, as you were looking for a superintendent, if you looked at and unpacked the data, you would see that during my tenure at every single school district that I've had the pleasure of leading, I have doubled the amount of professional development dollars in order to invest on our most valuable resource, and that is our staff. You will see that if you did the homework and checking, where does this guy spend his money and why? You will see that when it comes to the strategic plan, you will see dollars being very deliberate and intentional about eradicating decades of inequality in this district. Moving, as I conclude year 2, I think we've done enough talking. I think we've done enough gathering of information to realize that there are significant areas in which for years, we have not moved the needle for particular groups, and there needs to be action around that process. I shared with this board this app that I carry with on my phone that counts down from the day I got the job to the day you decide whether or not you want to renew my contract. Every day I think about the sense of urgency and the need to be able to put systems into place in order to do what I believe our staff is ready and willing and poised to do, as long as we continue through action and through words, double down on their commitment. It was very surprising to me, and reviewing the budget and talking to staff, how much little credence was put into how many times we've said no to staff who themselves asked, we'd like to go and learn A, B, C, or D. And there's evidence where we said, no, thank you, no, thank you, no, thank you, and no, thank you. And you want great systems, you need great people. To have great people, you need to nourish them and cultivate them and make sure that they are at the cutting edge of their professional learning experiences. So I don't necessarily think about, as I create the budget, I'm pulling from line items with what I'm asked to work with and say, how do we make more efforts into providing professional learning experiences for our staff, who at the end of the day are what I call the soldiers on the ground, who are delivering all of the things we're asking them to do. Hence the reason why, as a result of that, we got to think about their well-being as well and be more strategic. So yes, you'll see that in the next budget. You'll see particular areas where there are some gaps that we need to close immediately, and we need those funding streams to do that. But we absolutely will make sure that we provide the board with why we're doing it and what are the outcomes? What I expect is from this board, as you ask questions, all right, well, you did this, now what? And what is the evidence of that? Are we seeing that? Are we seeing the fruits of our labor? If not, what pivots do we need to make? The same way when we talked about cost benefit analysis as part of our strategic intent, there are some things that are nice, but they're not bearing fruit, and we need to rethink the way in which we do that. But we definitely will provide that information.
Ms. Dolly, thank you for asking the question, because as you ask as a newer board member, there's plenty of other people are asking the same things or thinking the same things. So I
Yes.
appreciate that you're asking the questions. All right, that takes us then to our vote. So Ms. Elias, if you would please take the roll call vote on this section.
Mr. Henry.
Aye.
Mrs. Hobart.
Aye.
Mr. Kudus.
Aye.
Mrs. Dole.
Aye.
Mrs. Vogt. Aye. Ms. Witsat.
Aye.
Ms. Witkowski Smith.
Aye.
Dr. Grande. And Mrs. Walkman. Personnel items 9A through P passes 9-0.
You hold just a moment, the mics are not working.
I think you just wore it down.
I think it was intentional and deliberate about the difference. Why is mine and anyone not working? No, yours is not. Is it still on? We'll figure it out.
We'll just all share that.
Yes, we'll share that one.
Measure.
Okay, I take that back. The president and the superintendent have been officially muted.
Thanks for saying that. You brought it on us. You jinxed us. Technological failure.
There.
All right. It's good.
Kelly. You want to sit in my chair?
I'm okay. I think I can, it'll pick it up. All right, next up in, we have 9 items in, whoops, went too far ahead, sorry. Next, we have policy.
Correct.
Right? All right. We have 5 policies in this section for approval. Is there any item, any policy that anyone would like to separate? All right, seeing none, do I have a motion for approval? Actually, let me read them first. Policy 205, postgraduate students, policy 330, overtime, policy 338, sabbatical leave, policy 338.1, compensated professional leave, and policy 349, resignation. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Kudus. Do I have a second?
Second.
I think I heard Kevin, Mr. Henry first, so I'll give that one to Mr. Henry. Any questions or comments? Please. Ms. Elias, if you would please take the roll call vote.
Mrs. Hobart.
Aye.
Mr. Kudus.
Aye.
Mrs. Dole.
Aye.
Mrs. Vogt.
Aye.
Ms. Witsat.
Aye.
Ms. Witkowski Smith.
Aye.
Dr. Grande.
Aye.
Mr. Henry.
Aye.
And Mrs. Walkman.
Aye.
Policies 205, 330, 338, 338.1, and 349 passes 9-0.
Thank you. All right, we have 2 items for action in student services. The first is an educational services agreement for a student. And second, we have homebound instruction approval for 1 student. Do we have any questions or comments on these? Seeing none, Ms. Elias, roll call. Oh, sorry, motion to approve.
Ms. Witsat.
Ms. Witsat, I went totally out of order on that. I'm sorry. Ms. Witsat, with the first, do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Henry, is the second. Now, any questions or comments? None. Ms. Elias, if you please take the roll.
Mr. Kudus.
Aye.
Mrs. Dole.
Aye.
Mrs. Vogt,
Aye.
Ms. Witsat,
Aye.
Ms. Wachowski Smith,
Aye.
Dr. Grande,
Aye.
Mr. Henry,
Aye.
Mrs. Hobart,
Aye.
and Mrs. Walkman.
Aye.
Student Services, items A through B passes 9-0.
All right, we have 9 items in finance for action this evening. First, we have the financial statements for January of 2023 as stipulated. Second, we have the treasurer's report for January of 2023 as stipulated. Did I miss one?
Yes. Hey, yes, that.
I'm gonna go back. Yep, sorry, I cut off at the bottom of the page. So I'm gonna start that over. First, item A, we have bills paid to vendors January 14th, 2023 through February 17th, 2023. As attached. Item B, financial statements, January 2023, as attached. Item C, treasurer's report for January 2023 as attached. Item D, the Power Schoolology contract.
Schoology.
School- no.
It's spelled wrong.
In my defense, it is spelled wrong. I think as much as we like, and we have.
When it comes to our rescue, Dr. Grande.
Thank you.
Yes.
Technical difficulties. All right, we'll do that one again. We have item D, Power School in the Schoology contract as attached. Item E, approval of tax settlements as stipulated. Item F, contract with Holcomb Behavioral Health Services as attached. And I want to be clear, that one is because we are required to have a student assistance program, and that is the designated vendor to provide those services. Item G, a contract with Kings Mill Incorporated. This is already the approval of a contract for the prom reservation for the class of 2025 junior prom. April 13th of 2024, mark the date. Item H, we have a contract with the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit. And this is for the proposal for the assessment of the business office operations and ongoing support and transition as attached. Item I, the agreement with People Bench that Dr. Marseille spoke about in his superintendent's report as attached. All items are as stipulated or as attached in the agenda. Do I have a motion? We have one approval. Did you want me to something? Okay, all right. So if Dr. Grande for motion to approve, do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kudis. Questions and comments, Ms. Holbrook?
Yeah, could we clarify the contract with Montgomery County Intermediate Unit? And also, one more comment about People Bench. We've been talking a lot today, it seems, about following up, and just making sure that new things are working. I don't exactly know what, like the criteria or parameters for what success with People Bench really means. But I would just like us to sort of be cognizant of coming back at a certain point and, saying, is this worth it? Is this worth it? Is it working how we wanted it to? I know it's not, an overwhelming expense, but I think it's worthwhile to do that with any new contract. So I just wanted to make that point, but back to the NCIC.
Dr. Marseille, do you want to speak to them? CIU?
Well, I shared with the board to some extent in executive session, the things I needed for the the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit to do. If other organizations were doing it, I wouldn't have to make them in, because that's not what they're looking at. And there are some ways in which I want to think differently. And it's about what I shared before about constant improvement. And as such, the services that they are going to provide this district in the short term will help us in the long term with that department.
Question about the People Bench
Like, I'm just thinking, like, when I hear you speak, Dr. Marseille, you speak of your vision and the future and what you want to achieve during your tenure here so eloquently. I don't understand why you have to bring in a people bench to say and do what you already are doing.
We're doing that with everything else, which is evidence-based, which is based on data. And that's why we bring individuals in to help us not necessarily talk about it, but be more strategic in how we're doing it. I can say that we are committed in increasing our retention and recruitment of staff, but the extent in which, how is that going to play out? And who are individuals who are leading the industry and helping systems like ours be more deliberate and intentional. When I say that we want to hear more from staff, well, when we do that, what are the actionable steps in which we're taking place? One of the things that I had shared prior to presenting this to the board is my ongoing conversations with union leadership. And share with them what I wanted to do, what we were committed to doing, and shared people bench, what they did, what they proposed to do, and how we believe that's going to foster stronger relationships with not only each other, but with the administration, and work towards making it a much more healthier work environment. And that is our commitment. We want to make sure that we're constantly attuned to what's happening and how our staff is feeling, the same way in which we do wellness check-ins periodically with our students. We want to be able to do that through a research lens. And then we want them to support our human resource department in terms of what does it really mean in terms of recruitment? What are we doing that may unintentionally not bringing those candidates to our doors? You're talking of Pennsylvania made reference to the diversity of the workplace. Districts talk about doing that. What extent are we being really deliberate and intentional in the advertisement, the interview process? And then once those individuals are here, how do we make sure that as we work on making this place a much more inclusive and welcoming environment for our students, that we're also making it the same place for our staff. So there's a level of expertise that comes with this partnership. And I would expect this board, it goes without saying, but I appreciate individuals repeating it, that your job is to ask for how is this going and when are we gonna get feedback and anything that we do, period. With regards to whether it's new or not. So you shouldn't ask just because I bring something new. You should be asking questions about, okay, what's happening with this? And what are we doing with our core initiatives as a board in our commitments, right? So I welcome those opportunities to share more information and or periodically bringing back to the board what is happening. And I ask that you don't think about it just as well as we're bringing in something new. We've been doing a lot of stuff for a very long time. We should ask about those too, in terms of, hey, we've been running the program for the last 3 years. What does it mean to us and what does it look like? I plan to make sure that things that I've brought in to think differently, that I will beat you to that request because it's in my timeline in terms of a year ago, I presented this to the board and said, this is my rationale. We need to come back to the board and share what has been our experience. Why do we believe we need to continue with it or why we need to pivot.
Dr. Marseille, could you comment briefly on the challenges that we have experienced with respect to payroll and what we are doing about that?
I want to be sensitive
Yes, I
to the
understand.
conversation around payroll. It's a personnel matter. If there were unfortunate human error that led to some payroll challenges across the entire district. So individuals who received a paycheck, unfortunately, because the tax tables were inputted incorrectly, it created a significant amount of challenges for almost every single staff member. And as a result, we wanted to find out the extent in which, how did this happen? And what are we doing to ensure that it doesn't? So there was individuals who came to analyze our protocols. Some of it, to the extent, was human error. Others were failure to follow current protocols that have been put into place that would have possibly caught that prior to that happening. But that's the reason why I've shared with this board that I need a bigger understanding of that, and that's what they bring in to reimagine that. I share with the board that, and I'll be coming back, that there may be some reclassifications of positions and that the market requires particular set of expertise that maybe that we are not attracting, recruiting some of those individuals as a result of the salary that is being offered, hence some of the gaps that I've noticed and that we need to improve on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll just make this doesn't work, so I'll try to talk loud, maybe turn that one on, down there. That will make a difference, but I just think that we're, just with respect to the IU contract, that it's important that we move forward. There is no more important foundation to the operations than to make sure we have a very effective business department and that those operations are functioning as they need to. We did just approve 3 departures in that department, business administrator, the payroll and accounting specialist, and the accounting supervisor. And so it's really important for the school district that we get that department put back on firm footing ASAP. And so I very much support bringing in the help to do that.
I think too, I'll just comment too, that a lot of folks, we're familiar with the intermediate units, more in terms of like early intervention support and special education type supports. All of the intermediate units offer a suite of additional services and expertise that they contract out to school districts. And so we've taken advantage of that in numerous occasions, working with the Delaware County Intermediate Unit, the Chester County, and in the time I've been on the board, Chester County IU, now in Montgomery County IU, they all specialize in different things and have different expertise. But you're not going to get better expertise that's focused in school district matters than you really can do, and for an extraordinarily competitive price that you would never get going out to the general market, not the least of which you wouldn't get the right type of support either. So agree with what Dr. Grande said as well. Any other comments in this section? Right, seeing none, Ms. Elias, if you'll please take the roll call.
Mrs. Dole? Aye.
Mrs. Vogt,
Aye.
Ms. Witset, Ms. Wachowski Smith,
Aye.
Dr. Grande,
Aye.
Mr. Henry,
Aye.
Mrs. Holbert,
Aye.
Mr. Kudis,
Aye.
and Mrs. Walkman.
Aye.
Finance items A through I passes 9-0.
We moved up audience recognition previously, so it takes us to old business. Is there any old business that anyone would like to discuss? None, new business. We do have one item, we want to celebrate.
Well, I do want to thank the board, and I want to welcome Ms. Cotton, who's sitting in the audience since the meeting started, and we're yes, who is our. That's okay. That's all right. You'll work on that, but we're really excited to have her in the role of communications and community engagement liaison. So we're really excited for her to be here. She's gonna start with us on the 6th, and she's already been coming to the office, trying to get a better understanding, with our fingers crossed that she would be board approved, because we know it's not official until the board says it, but we're excited that she's here. And if it's testimony to her work ethic, she didn't have to stay, all right, but it goes to show who she is. So we're happy to have her. So welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. No. No, want to be equitable. She'll come to the next future meeting and she'll talk. Yes.
All right, any other new business? All right, with that, the meeting is adjourned.